Well, State Representative Christina Bohannan, thanks for joining us for Beyond the Podium. We've got a lot to talk about, so I need to get to the major issues right away. There's a recent report that 60% of Americans right now are living paycheck to paycheck. Now that is astronomical when you consider the majority of Americans are also in the middle class. If the actions taken by this White House and a Congress controlled by Democrats haven't really been able to get this under control yet in terms of inflation and wages not really coming up with it, what is the incentive then to elect another Democrat to the House and potentially keep the Democrats in control of Congress?
Yeah, well, thank you. Thanks for having me. As I've been going all over Southeast Iowa, I am talking to people who are struggling with inflation. Individuals, families, small business owners who are struggling with those costs. And I understand that struggle. I think we need to elect people who understand that struggle and who will really help to bring those costs down. And when I was growing up, I remember my mom only had a certain amount of money we could spend on groceries. I grew up in a trailer off of a dirt road. Neither of my parents graduated high school. And we really struggled a lot. I joke that one of my happiest days was when we moved to my double wide, when we got a double wide, because I know what people are struggling with. And at one point, my dad lost his health insurance. He had had emphysema for a long time, and just as he got really, really sick, they canceled his health insurance. And we had no choices, at that point. So I understand what that struggle is like. And so now, as I'm talking to people all over Iowa, I hear that struggle. I hear how hard this is for them. And, eggs are up 40% or something, milk's $5 a gallon in some places. So I get it. So I think the thing is, what we have to do is to look for ways that we can cut those costs. And, the fact is that a lot of what's happening with inflation now is a perfect storm. It was COVID, with the shutdown in a lot of production. And then when people started to come out of the pandemic and ready to get on with their lives, which, we all kind of are ready to do that, there was a lot of pent up demand. And so, so you're going to have higher prices when you have a lot greater demand than you have supply. Also, Putin's war in Ukraine obviously had a huge effect on gas prices. So it's a perfect storm. We have to get those costs under control. And one of the things we need to do is make sure that we are holding corporate entities accountable for price gouging. We have seen some of that, companies that say that they had to raise prices because of COVID or supply chain problems or something like that, but then they're posting record profits, and so we need to get to the bottom of corporate price gouging. I think some of the actions that have been taken on gas are good. I supported releasing more oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve here in the United States. I think that was a good move, and I also think that extending year-round ethanol was a good thing, and that can help bring down those gas prices while also helping Iowa's economy.
I'm going to come back to ethanol in just a moment, but first I want to ask you, we keep hearing from the Federal Reserve Chairman that interest rate hikes are likely to continue, and admits that means there's going to be more pain before things get better. And by pain, the assumption is he's talking about job losses and an unemployment that he feels needs to come up. How is that a winning message? Because largely this is something that economists say has to happen. Do you see another way of getting through this without a deep, deep recession?
Well, I think all of that is still to come. I mean, we don't know. The Fed is an independent agency, so as a member of Congress, you really don't have much control over what they do. I will tell you that I think there's really a mix of opinion on that. And so, the Fed, it deals with interest rates. That's really the one main lever that it has to deal with the economy. And it's a careful balance of sort of job creation or job loss versus managing inflation and with those interest rates. And so, yeah.
Sorry, the Federal Reserve is independent, but Congress does have oversight. If you were sitting on a committee that had the Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell in front of you, what would be your questions for him about this strategy?
Yeah, well, one thing I would want to know is why they weren't monitoring this more back like last year. I mean, there was a time when we saw inflation was starting to come, and that the Fed did not take action on that and just waited. And I think what happened largely is that it became a crisis. And I think that they should have been monitoring this and should have been more careful about that all along the way, because, you know, we can absorb smaller interest rates over time. What's hard is this sudden shock of increasing the interest rates dramatically. So I would want to get to the bottom of that and make sure that doesn't happen again.
One of the measures that the Biden administration has taken to try and ease some of the burden on many Americans is the student loan forgiveness plan, $10,000, $20,000 if you receive Pell Grants. You said earlier you did not support that. Here in Iowa, more than 90% of people that currently have student loan debt are going to get relief from this. Yeah. How is that a bad thing then? Yeah,
well, I'm pleased that if this program is rolling out, that Iowans can benefit from it. I think that's great, and it is interesting that in a place like Iowa, and especially in my first congressional district, the I think the median individual income is something like $40,000, kind of give or take. And so, you know, our people who are getting this benefit do fall in that category of people who really need this relief. So I am happy about that. You know, but here's the thing. You know, college tuition is just too high. And in Iowa, we have been seeing the legislature, the governor, disinvest in public education, including our universities, consistently underfunding them, which has made tuition have to rise so that universities can cover those costs. And I really am concerned about that, both as a professor who works with young people and sees the debt that they're taking on, but also just, you know, from my own background. I was the first in my family to go to college. College tuition was very affordable when I went, and that's why I was able to go and work my way through. It's very difficult now to actually work your way through college. It's almost impossible to afford the tuition and work your way through. So affordability is a huge issue for me, but one-time debt relief for one group of people at a snapshot in time is not going to solve that problem. And we need to address the problem for not just people now, but, you know, the next generation of students and the next generation. And so I worry about that, about kind of saying, oh, declare victory, you know, we've given student debt relief and now we don't have to worry about college affordability anymore. But in addition to that, there is a fairness issue. And that is that people who didn't go to college, or people who went to college but didn't take out loans, or whatever those choices were, you know, they shouldn't have to foot the bill for higher income families or people who did choose to go to college. So it's tricky. And so I'm not saying I don't support any debt relief. I do support some. I would really like to see that debt relief be very targeted to those who need it and make sure that we're not unfairly burdening other people.
Getting back to ethanol right now, you say you support the expanded use of ethanol. Mm-hmm. It is a major industry here in Iowa, yet there are several studies that show that from the soil to the gas tank, it produces more pollutants than even oil does. How is that a good strategy when it comes to combating climate change?
Yeah, so, you know, ethanol is a big industry here in Iowa, and I think that I have seen multiple studies on this, and honestly, you know, there's one and then there's the other. Some say ethanol is better for the climate, some say it's not. You know, and so I think that while we are figuring that out, we also have to deal with the more immediate problem of gas prices here in the United States. So I think that there are short-term issues and long-term issues. I think in the short term, we have to get gas prices down. Ethanol is a really good solution for that, and it's also good for Iowa's economy. But at the same time, you know, obviously we also need to invest in other renewable fuels, and Iowa is really good for that as well. I mean, we are a leader in solar energy and wind energy. We get more of our electricity here from from renewables than just about any other state. That can be a real growth area for us, and it can bring on really good jobs. We also can be a destination for companies to locate here who want to reduce their carbon footprint. So there are companies who want to be able to tell their consumers that they get, that they've reduced their carbon footprint. Iowa could be a great place to locate for that because so much of our electricity here comes from renewables.
Switching gears now, a poll this summer, the Iowa poll from the Des Moines Register found abortion is the second most critical issue for Iowa voters this year, behind only inflation, of course. Now, if the issue is with Republicans seeking to ban most abortions here in Iowa, which many believe they will try to do in the next legislative session. Do you think, though, that will actually bring people on both sides out on this issue, because there are a number of Iowans who support a ban on abortion?
So what we're seeing as we're talking to people at the doors and and out at events is this is an issue that cuts across party. Democrats, independents, and even a lot of Republicans support the right to choose. They do not believe that in that government overreach and putting politicians in the seat of trying to decide deeply personal, private issues for women. My opponent has sponsored not one, but 2 nationwide abortion ban proposals, one of which a life at conception bill that would ban all abortions from the moment of conception with no exceptions at all for rape, incest, or to save the life of the woman. So, this is simply not where Iowans are. It's not where Americans are. My opponent talks a lot about government overreach, but the fact is this is a huge example of government overreach into the most, the most private, personal parts of someone's life. And yes, I think it's absolutely going to happen. Governor Reynolds has also already announced that she wants an abortion ban. I think she suggested 6 weeks, which is really, really early. It's a time when many, many people don't know that they're pregnant. And so I think that's a huge problem. In Congress, these nationwide abortion ban proposals have gotten, I think one of them got 94 co-sponsors. The Life at Conception bill that Miller-Meeks supported has 166 sponsors on it. So this is very real. This is what will happen. This is what they will push for if they're elected.
Speaking of your opponent, Congresswoman Miller-Meeks, she says you support the National Bailout Fund. Now, this is a group she claims supports defunding the police. Do you support defunding the police? And either way, what do you think Congress needs to do right now to combat rising rates of violence, rather?
Absolutely not. I do not support that. And you know what? We know that I don't support that because the Daily Iowan newspaper did a fact check on that claim a year ago and said it was 100% completely false. So there's no truth in it whatsoever. This is a very tired attack, frankly, that we've been seeing against Democrats all over the place. It's not happening. I don't support it. I'm currently in the Iowa legislature. I don't know a single person in my Iowa Democratic caucus in the House that supports it. So no. Look, what we need to do is invest more in our police. One of the things that I love about Iowa is our sense of community. I grew up in a very small town. We didn't have to look over our shoulder every second. It was a tight-knit community. Kids could be kids there, and that's what I love about Iowa too. And frankly, law enforcement is part of that. I am a law professor. I like laws. I think they should be enforced. I have dedicated 23 years of my career to that. So, of course I'm going to support law enforcement. I'm going to advocate for robust funding so that they can keep our communities safe. We need to make sure that they have good pay and benefits. We have to recruit the best and the brightest. I supported in the Iowa legislature an amendment to a bill that would give law enforcement better benefits. That law enforcement had asked for more increased benefits that would be for sort of sick leave and retirement. And the Republican legislature took it out. They took out the very benefits that law enforcement had advocated the strongest for. I supported an amendment that would have put that back in the bill. I do support that. So, the other thing that we need to do is to add more personnel and support for law enforcement. One of the things that I've been hearing a lot about when I've talked to law enforcement around in the district is that they spend a lot of their time on calls for homeless people, for people who have drug addiction or who are mentally ill. So we really need to provide social workers, mental health professionals, and others who can help them so that once law enforcement has determined that there's not a real threat, those other professionals can come in and deal with those issues so that we can have our law enforcement get back to dealing with violent crime, which is what we really need to do.
One thing Republicans say is connected to the rise in violent crime is issues at the southern border. We've seen a record number of border crossings this year when you account for both illegal crossings and those seeking asylum. Do you believe that right now our southern border is secure?
So I believe that both Democrats and Republicans have failed on the issue of immigration. I think Washington politicians just keep kicking this can down the road with disastrous consequences in some cases. So to me, Democrats, especially those on the coast and in big cities, they kind of don't acknowledge the problem at the border sometimes. They don't acknowledge that border states do have unique challenges in dealing with the influx of people across the border. And they're having to watch as people are being left to die in trucks down there, or and things like that. And that's heartbreaking for communities there. So that's a problem. But on the other hand, the Republicans, they haven't wanted to deal with this problem in good faith because they keep using it for political gain. They keep using it as a wedge issue to divide people and pulling political stunts like putting people on trucks or planes, even using taxpayer dollars to put these immigrants on trucks and planes and sending them across the country without even knowing where they're going. I mean, that's just cruel, So I think we need to stop with the political stunts, put that aside, and both parties come together, acknowledge the problem, and we need to do, comprehensive immigration reform, and that means securing our border. Whether it's a wall or whether it's technological measures, whatever works, given the terrain or whatever, we need to secure the border. And then we also need to work on a pathway to citizenship for law-abiding and responsible people. And we have many of them in Iowa. We have a lot of immigrants in Iowa who are really contributing to our communities. They are small business owners, they're good workers, and we need them here. We have a workforce crisis, and what I'm hearing from the places in our district is that we need them here. So we need to work on that, and we need to help them and our small businesses navigate the bureaucracy of the INS, which is vast and complicated, and we need to make sure that we can help them with that.
I don't want to inaccurately read between the lines here, so I just need to ask again, do you feel right now the southern border is secure?
No, I think that we need. I think we need some more security there. I think. We've been seeing that influx, and I think that we need to work on that. So we need to secure the border. But this is a much bigger issue than just a snapshot in time today and what we're seeing. This is something that has been going on for years, where that both sides just are not coming to the table on this. And I think that's a failure of my opponent. People like Mariannette Miller-Meeks who are in Washington, but on both sides.
Last question. This is a district that historically has been reliably Democratic here in Iowa. Congresswoman Miller-Meeks is Republican. She won it by just 6 votes in the last cycle. But since then, there's been redistricting. And based on some of the most recent elections, that dynamic has changed more in the Republicans' favor. In fact, I just checked the latest forecast from 538. They're giving you a 9 in 100 chance of winning this race. Now, obviously, I assume you don't agree with that assessment. But what do you plan to do between now and Election Day to improve those odds and score a win?
Yeah, so I have every intention of winning this race. Our polling shows that we are doing extremely well here. And more important than that is what we're hearing on the ground. When we are canvassing, we are hearing great enthusiasm, across the board, including from a lot of Republicans and independents as well. And I think that what we hear a lot is that my opponent tells them one thing, and then they see her do something completely opposite in Washington, D.C. She has been voting consistently against every single bill that would make Iowans' everyday lives better, against infrastructure, against bringing really good-paying manufacturing jobs back to places like Iowa, away from places like China and Taiwan, against letting Medicare negotiate for lower drug prices and capping the price of insulin for seniors on Medicare. And so, over and over on all of these issues, we see that she is, telling Iowans she cares about them, but then voting against every single thing that would make everyday Iowans' lives better. And people are tired of it. They want to change. And so, so we're hearing great enthusiasm, and I think it's going to make us victorious in November.
Well, forecasting and polls can say whatever they want or whatever they find, but ultimately it does come down to the voters of Southeast Iowa. Christina Bohannan, Democratic candidate for Congress, thank you for joining us for Beyond the Podium.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.